Yeah, I'm really, really glad to join you in this journey as you are, becoming Baltic MIL game developers. And I heard that you are in the process of developing a MIL game that you can use in your classrooms. And maybe to start, I'm curious to hear what your goal is for the end users, for your students with your games. Maybe you can do you have an idea, a quick thought on this? What is your goal for your game?
I can start my game or simulation game, not exactly both. It is idea that there are a lot of psychological media manipulation in internet, and to give students overview what different techniques have been used, and since they can take role of trolls and create one attack to some narrative or whatever is in this moment relevant. And then after that, there will be a reflection to think, okay, if there are these techniques and happens what we did, then how we can protect ourselves. So this kind of, let's say it's injection, we call it, little knowledge how things work and how to protect against this stuff.
Super interesting. Thank you for sharing, Diana. Any more answers on this? What are your goals for your game?
On Latvian side, well, our goal is to create a discussion between youngsters. So, what could be fake news? How do we recognize them? But most important thing is to talk about it, and through the discussions and information given we're about to develop game cards which have a bit of information and then a question on the other side. So through the question we could discuss further some topics, but that will be playful and in a playful manner, not to make everything too serious and to interest the kids in the topic.
Great, thank you. So you've basically summarized two very important things. You want the game to be interactive and fun, but you also want your students to learn a lot. You have skills and knowledge you want to convey in an interactive way. So let's have a look and how we can do this the best way to create an educational but also very fun game for your students. And for that, I brought some inspiration, some games, and some experiences from DW, the German public broadcaster, from DW Akademie, but also from outside. So I want to start with a game that is called Lamboozled. It's a game that got developed by two professors of Columbia University. It's a MIL card game, so you have little cards that you can play with. And there are 4 different kinds of cards. So there's news cards, content cards, evidence cards, and action cards. And you start by putting 1 news card on the table for everyone to see, as well as 3 context cards that give a context to your news, as well as providing 4 evidence and action cards to each player. So let's try to play the game, shall we? Here's a news which we can read together. So Rams quarterback faked injury according to anonymous friend. And now maybe Lina and Martins, you can have a look at your set of hands. These are your cards to either verify the news as true or false. What do you think? What do these cards show you? Do you have enough to build a case to explain if the news are true or false?
I would say we have enough clues. Well, there was no there wasn't a real person like who cited it, or like there is no source, so there are no links included in the story, and there is not too much info, so we would confirm it as a fake news.
Okay.
Do I understand the game is the question.
Yes, so of course you can
Okay.
use common knowledge, and you can also use these cards on your hand. So, for example, there is no link included in the story, or there is not much info about the source on the page on your cards. So you can use your common knowledge, as you just said. There's no source behind this, and you can also use these cards to build evidence to either verify the news as true or false. And Lina and Martin decided that the news are false, and they now submit their evidence, and now the group can discuss. Everyone has to put down their cards as well to either prove the news as true or false, and the group can discuss the case. And at this point, there might be a teacher jumping in to moderate the discussion, ask further questions. But generally, the idea is to get the students think about news that they receive. And it doesn't necessarily need to be that all of them get the answer wrong or right. It doesn't really matter. The idea is just to let them try out these critical thinking skills and let them discuss among themselves so that they can use these this approach also when they're reading news in their daily lives. And this is kind of the main aim of this card game, which I will share the link with you if you want to have a closer look at it. It's just a simple card of deck, so it's not a lot of material you need for it, and it can be played in a classroom. You can have each player for themselves, or you can also build groups in order to make it fit for also like a large group of students. Any questions on this game before we move on to the next one? Okay. So the next one is a DW game. It's called Go Verify, and it plays in the year 2030. In this scenario, in the future, we still have a lot of crises going on. There's a climate crisis, economic injustice, nationalism, weird people with even more weird ideas. And in this game, the players are playing themselves. So you are you. You are trying to keep up with the news. You're trying to keep up with family and friends, and you're trying to keep sane in a social network full of disinformation and hate speech. And you get shown a news timeline, a social media timeline, as you can see here, as in any other social media platform you know. And you get shown information bits like this one. And your goal is to investigate each news bit, and you have to either share it or block it. There's always a certain amount of time you have to verify each news, and you can either decide directly to share or block, or you can use the little duck here in the corner to help you review. So let's click on it. We have two options here. We can do a web search or a reverse image search. Let's try Googling the keywords of this news bit. In this case, nothing comes up, which is probably not a good sign. So the player might decide to block these news. And great success, you blocked some nonsense content and you earned 69 points. Good job. This is an online game that can be played in the browser. It's currently available in English, but it's open source. So if you're interested in looking into the content they share, I will share a link with you to look into all the information they used for this. Any questions on the Go Verify game developed by DW? Okay. Then I bought another one, which is called the Speak Up game. This one is rather developed for an older audience, so for adults, and it's about digital participation. It's about making sure that people get informed, but also can be heard online. It's a role play, so when starting the game, you get a dedicated role. You can be, for example, a little girl, the president of this country, or a teacher. And the highlight of the game is that you can pitch an idea of how to enhance digital participation from the perspective of your role. So the little girl might have different powers than the president might have. So you have to take that into account when pitching your idea. But you have to come up with a great idea, because the goal is to make other people, other players believe in your idea, so that you can earn points to win the game. However, you all have the same goal, to actually enhance digital participation. And yeah, the game ends when someone reaches a certain amount of numbers. So the goal is always to find the best solution to enhancing digital participation. Here's one of the players, the young girl. Not a good role to have in this game, and unfortunately, because it doesn't have many powers. But yeah, it's a board game, so you have a big board, and then some card bits and coins. Any questions for this Speak Up game? Like I said, it's developed for adults, but I still think we can use some inspiration from it.
How many participants can be? Because here is really a lot for one board game.
Yeah, that's true. So there are 8 players in the game. So there's 8 roles, but you can always make groups for each player to use. So you can be, for example, 4 players in being the president together, which is also a great way to play this, because you can strategize among your team members. So I would say, you shouldn't do bigger groups than 4, I would say, because then it gets too big and some people won't really participate anymore. But yeah, I think like about 20, 25 people is a good amount still for this game. Okay, moving on to another example of the adventures of Literatus. It's another online game co-developed by DW Akademie. It's a fantasy adventure of the kingdom of Informia. And unfortunately, the beloved princess has disappeared, and there are rumors that she will soon marry the evil Manipulus, who is determined to take over Informia. And Informia is a place where people live in harmony with accurate information, where people trust each other. But Manipulus wants to take over this kingdom. And the online players join the Prince Literatus, who is going on a fact-finding adventure to rescue the princess and also to save the kingdom from chaos and misinformation. And on his way, Literatus runs into good and bad and questionable media people, and he has to solve a lot of MIL puzzles. And the player help him to find hints, connect the dots, and fact check information. You can always use this hint button if you don't get along, but if you don't get further, but you get little quizzes like this one, like fact checking information, in order to help Prince Literatus to win over the game. and not let Manipulus ruin the kingdom of Informia. This also can be played in a browser and is currently available in 5 languages. I will share the link with you as well if you want to try it out, which we don't have the time for now, unfortunately. Yeah, and I want to do a little summary of what we looked through now and gather some tips on how you can make your game more fun. So these are a bunch of tips. You can take them or leave them. But yeah, I think these are worth considering when developing your game. So of course, competition. I think barely anyone thinks of games and not think of competition. It makes people care, it makes them be excited, and it can also be combined with an element of teamwork, like for example in the Speak Up game or in Lambuzo, where you can strategize with team members, which also increases motivation of the players. Another element to consider is role playing. If you create funny and interesting roles, like the president, the little girl, people are interested in jumping into a different character. It's always fun to jump into someone else's shoes, and it's interesting what comes with a different role. And you can also be creative when creating the names for them. You can be more literate. Like there was one game, for example, where we code the characters just as their characteristics. So there was Little Miss Chatterbox or Mr. Serious, which also adds another element of fun. Then the unexpected. I think it's a great way of keeping the players on their toes. It makes sure that the game doesn't get boring. It changes up the situation. An example of that could be event cards that change the situation for everyone, and everyone needs to adapt quickly. And last but not least is channeling your inner Sherlock Holmes, which also was part of some of the games here. Connecting the dots, making connections of hints you receive, and understanding the bigger context is also a fun way of making a game more interesting for your players. All of this, of course, is not rocket science, and I'm sure you've seen or recognized some of these before, but just as a tip of what to look out for when you're developing your game. And then here are some more tips for the process when developing a game. One is starting familiar, and I'm actually sure that you're already doing this. You're somehow all connected to media and information literacy, as we just heard, and so it makes sense to start from what you know, and you can draw inspiration from situations you've already had with students when conveying MIL skills. Maybe there was one thing that your students found particularly interesting or exciting. Maybe you can take a look at that and draw inspiration from that point, and you can capitalize upon the excitement that you've already seen. Another point is starting small, which is on the one hand important because it makes it easier for you to try out things, but also it makes sense to keep the development costs low. You can start by scribbling something like on a piece of paper, and you can always extend it from there. But it's important that your game makes sense in a small scope as well. And this one I find super important, is prototyping fast and very soon so that you can fail forward. I think yeah, all of you probably have an idea of how you want the game to play out. As soon as you have an idea, you might have an idea of first this will happen, then the players will do this and that. So you can start by thinking this through and making like a storyline. This can be only like 5 points, but it makes sense to think it through and write it down. And then develop a prototype quickly. Here you can see a brush tied to a telephone, but I think this goes for everything. Like you should aim for low resolution. Like I said, you can just do a quick scribble on your piece of paper, or you can use existing things and putting them together in order to start trying out your game very fast. And then it's important to get feedback. So as soon as you have a rough idea, a rough first prototype, it makes sense to introduce your prototype to a group of people. This can be your colleagues, your family, someone you trust. You don't need to go out to the end users directly. And introduce the prototype as a work in progress. But you should also invite your participant to treat the prototype as if it was real, and invite the participants to try out the game, and invite them to be honest and stay neutral while you are letting them play. So don't intervene when they play, but rather stay in the background and just observe what happens. In case someone doesn't understand the rules, you don't have to go there and defend your prototype. It's such a information-rich moment for you to see how they interact with your prototype, that it's important to note down everything you see, and then you can take all of your observations in order to make a new prototype and test it again. But if you would go in and defend or try to explain your prototype, you would lose a lot of insights that you could get when developing, when letting your players play the game by themselves. And yeah, and then you make a new prototype and you test it again. I would suggest aiming for 2 to 3 testing rounds in order to get a lot of insights and also improve on the little details. If you have time for more rounds, that's even better. But I think 2 to 3 is kind of the minimum that you should try for. Yeah. This is it. I'm happy to go into more details in some of the games or some of the tips I shared. But for now, I want to say thank you for listening, and I'm very curious to see the process you're going to make in the next weeks, and I'm so glad to be part of it.